Welcome. I'm Diane Sharp. I'm the Director of Admissions for the Wharton MBA program for executives, and I'm based in Philadelphia. With me today for our webinar on the military benefits that our candidates and our students are eligible for. With me today, first of all, behind the scenes is my colleague, Kendra King. She is going to help me monitor the chat. We want to encourage everyone to post your questions on the chat. This is a small webinar, so if you're comfortable too, feel free to raise your hand. We'll call on you along the way. And then we have with us a first-year WEMBA student, as we call it. WEMBA is our internal designation for Wharton MBA for executives. So Greg Wellman, he is, as I mentioned, a WEMBA class of 2024. He just started. Greg, if you wouldn't mind saying hi and introducing yourself.
Hey everybody, Greg Wellman here. Like Diane said, first year WEMBA, about halfway through my second semester now. Also an active duty Army officer, and been through the application process and the VA benefits process fairly recently. So happy to answer any questions that pop up.
Okay. And also with us is Lynn Manuel. Lynn is the Penn representative for this program. She's the Veterans and Military Coordinator at the university as a whole. It's a centralized function here at Penn, but she knows our students very well because our students come with a unique background. They're not your traditional students. So Lynn, I'm going to turn it over to you. And again, please post questions along the way.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Lynn Manuel. I've been at Penn for not quite 2 years. Was going to be an academic, wound up marrying a Marine, spent quite a few years as a military spouse moving around, and did financial aid in grad school. So wound up coming to Penn to do that. And then Penn created a Veterans and Military Affiliated Coordinator position and asked me if I was interested in it. So I guess you could say I've kind of straddled both the academic world and military world. My kids will use their post 9/11 GI Bill benefits when they reach college age. So I have some experience both as a military spouse and parent, and then obviously as a coordinator at Penn. So I know a lot of students, prospective students, have questions about how their VA benefits work. And so what I have is just a PowerPoint presentation. I'm not going to bore you all by reading it slide by slide. But I will just kind of mention some of the, I think, the most important points, and then we'll leave time for questions at the end, because I know a lot of you probably have questions. So on that note, let me see if I can share my screen. Does everybody see that?
Yep.
Got it. We good? All right. So let's get started. Let me move this out of the way. And so really starting off with the most commonly used benefit at Penn in most schools. It's called Chapter 33. It's the post 9/11 GI Bill benefit. And it's based on, your eligibility is based on your length of service. So for a lot of students coming into the WEMBA program, they come in with 100% eligibility. And the VA determines eligibility for all education benefits. So if you're not sure, one of the things you can want to do is reach out to the VA and you can request what's called a COE, but I'll get into that in just a second. So for the post 9/11 GI Bill benefit, the VA sets a maximum limit every single year. For the current financial aid year, it's for 2022-2023, that maximum limit, this is for a student who has 100% eligibility, is $26,381.37. So payments, when it comes to that, are made directly to the school for a student who's enrolled. There's also a monthly housing allowance if you're not active duty. If you're active duty, you're obviously receiving BAH. But if you have separated, or if you're a dependent of a veteran or active duty service member, you would be receiving what's called MH8. That's your monthly housing allowance. That's paid directly from the VA to you. The way that the VA knows to do that is by me submitting an enrollment certification for you if you're registered for courses. So if you're not sure what the MHA amount would be, it's based on an E5 with dependents, and that's using Philadelphia zip code if you're going to be attending as part of the Philadelphia home for WEMBA. If you're going to be in San Francisco, it would be based on a San Francisco zip code. There's also a books and The book stipend, supply stipend is based on your enrollment, and that's also paid directly to students. The Yellow Ribbon Program, a lot of students have questions about that. And what the Yellow Ribbon Program is, it's a way that the VA can and schools can sort of help offset some of the costs if it's a private school or a higher cost institution of higher learning. The Yellow Ribbon Program, it's purely optional. Schools can choose to participate or not. Penn does. We actually have 100% representation at all of our schools within the University of Pennsylvania, which is great. For the Wharton School, there are an unlimited number of yellow ribbon slots, which is great news for you all, because if you have 100% eligibility in the post 9/11 GI Bill, that means you would automatically be able to receive a yellow ribbon slot. Previously, if you were an active duty service member, you were not eligible, or if you were the spouse of an active duty service member, you were not eligible. That changed as of August this year. So for Wharton, the yellow ribbon commitment for the current year is $20,000, and the VA matches that with $20,000. So what that means is for students like Greg, who are currently enrolled, they can receive for this financial aid year a maximum of $66,381.37. That's the combination of the post 9/11 GI Bill benefit and the yellow ribbon awards. The other thing that's important is that every August 1st, begins a new VA aid year. And what that means is that students who have remaining entitlement, in other words, months of eligibility left, and who are obviously enrolled in classes, they get a new round of benefits every August 1st. So, using Greg as an example, he started in the summer. Term 1 began in May. Term 1 actually fell on the previous financial aid year and VA aid year. So he was able to receive benefits for his first term. And then August 1st, got a new round of benefits, and that would cover students who are in terms 2, 3, and into term 4. The Fry Scholarship, thankfully, that's not a very common award here. That's awarded to children and surviving spouses of service members who died in the line of duty after September 10th, 2001. Chapter 31, Veteran Readiness and Employment, formerly called VOC Rehab. So you may have heard it called that. It's effectively the same thing. The VA just rebranded it. But what VRNE is, it is an employment program. And if you have a service-connected disability that could potentially limit your ability to work, VRNE basically would pay 100% of your tuition and mandatory fees at whatever school you attend. There's also a subsistence allowance. That's basically sort of the equivalent of a housing allowance. The rate is less than that of the Chapter 33 benefit. Having said that, if you started out using Chapter 33 benefits, in other words, a post 9/11 GI Bill benefit, and then a student is subsequently approved for Chapter 31, your VRNE counselor will, on a case-by-case basis, look to see if you might be eligible to receive the housing allowance at the Chapter 33 rate. All books and supplies, required books and supplies, are also paid 100% for Chapter 31. I would recommend, if you are not active duty, or if you are active duty, but you may be separating by the time you would be starting school, see if you would have a service connected disability. Get your disability rating from the VA first. That's kind of the starting point for Chapter 31. And then if you get that disability rating, you want to apply for Chapter 31, because of course the nice benefit to it is that 100% of your tuition and fees are covered. You would have to get healthcare through the VA. VA would not cover the Penn student insurance plan. But again, you would be getting your MBA effectively 100% paid for. So Chapter 35, very few graduate students use this, but there are a few. And what it is, it's basically a monthly payment that the VA makes to students. And that's if you are a dependent of a service member or veteran who was disabled or died while on active duty. All right, so what do you need to do if you want to use VA education benefits while you're attending Penn? For starters, you want to get that certificate of eligibility. Whether you're using Chapter 33, Chapter 35, the VA can provide you with your COE. And what the COE is going to tell you is how many months of entitlement you have for post 9/11 GI Bill benefit. The maximum is 36 months. And that's the equivalent of a 4-year undergraduate degree. But when you receive your COE, it's going to tell you how many months of entitlement you have, as well as your percentage of eligibility. Both of those things are really important. One of the reasons it's important is that if you've used your benefits at another school, you may be coming into your MBA program with 18 months of eligibility. And you want to know that when it comes to figuring out what your out-of-pocket expenses would be while you're getting your MBA. It also lets me know, as the school certifying official, how many months of benefits you're likely to have, or semesters of benefits you're likely to have. So requesting that COE is really important. And you want to always, get that, I would say every year or so. But any school certifying official is going to ask you for that. We would need to know that. What is your eligibility? What's your percentage of eligibility? So again, if you're not sure, you can contact the VA Education Call Center. You can call them and request a COE. You can also do it online. Their number is 1-888-GI-BILL-1. It's a number you want to have on hand because you ever have questions about your monthly housing allowance, your book stipend, that's the number to call. We have an internal form. It's called the VA information form. And that form is your way of letting me know that you do want to use your VA benefits, which type of benefit you want to use, and if you want to use your benefits every semester, you would be enrolled in classes. The reason that's important is that some students are coming into their graduate program with 36 months of entitlement. Some have less than that. Some have the full 36 months, but they want to transfer or have transferred some of their entitlement to their spouse or to their children. And you letting me know I want to use my benefit every semester I'm enrolled, that tells me every semester I'm going to be submitting an enrollment certification to the VA for you. If you say you only want to be submitted for part of the time, fall and spring, but maybe not in the summer, that's something you'll be letting me know on that VA information form. So again, it just lets me know that you're out there. If you haven't contacted me already, which I would not recommend, but if you didn't, that VA information form lets me know that you are a student, you do want to use your benefits, and then obviously your COE we need. And then if you have separated from active duty, then I would also need the member 4 copy of your DD 214. So that's for the post 9/11 GI Bill benefit for VRNE. You would get a letter from your VRNE counselor saying you've been approved for that. I would need a copy of that letter, member 4 copy of your DD 214, and also that VA information form. So basically, whatever benefit you're using, the VA information form, that's a requirement. You have to fill that out. What else should you know about VA education benefits at Penn? This goes for any school, anywhere. We are required as schools to be as accurate as possible when reporting enrollment certifications to the VA. That means if you are enrolled in classes and you drop a class, or you took a leave of absence, or you withdrew, or if you started Penn, let's say you're starting out on the post 9/11 GI Bill benefit, and while you start in your first semester, you decide to apply for Chapter 31 for VRNE. Once you get that approval, you would need to let me know really as soon as possible, preferably while you're going through the process. And it's important because the VA does not allow students to switch chapter benefits in the middle of the semester. So, students who started this past summer in the current cohort of WEMBA students, there were a couple contacted me and said, look, I'm applying for VRNE. I don't know which benefit I'm going to use. I don't know how long the approval process is going to take. Can I wait? Can I let you know? If you're in contact with me about any of those types of things, then I can work with you. If you drop classes or took a leave of absence, it's important to let me know that, because if I've submitted an enrollment certification to the VA for a student, and then that prompts the VA start paying the monthly housing allowance, and late in the semester prompts the VA to send payment, and then I find out after the fact that a student withdrew or dropped a bunch of courses, the student can wind up with a debt, either to the VA for the monthly housing allowance or to the university, because if we wind up having to send money back to the VA, then obviously payment would be due to Penn. So in any situation where you're having any kinds of changes, or you're not sure if you might take a leave of absence, you would want to be in touch with me. And again, especially if you might be changing your chapter benefit. So, and it's not uncommon, by the way, for students to start out using their post 9/11 GI Bill benefit for their first semester, and then get approval for VRNE and use that for their subsequent semesters while they're enrolled. One other thing I'll mention, because this is a new requirement the VA enacted December of last year for IHLs, is that's institutions of higher learning, by the way, sorry for the acronym. But the VA started requiring students who are using their post 9/11 GI Bill benefit and who are also receiving the monthly housing allowance. So obviously, if you're active duty, this would not apply to you. But for a student who's not active duty, who's receiving that monthly housing allowance, the VA now requires students to confirm their enrollment at the end of each month. And what it is, it's pretty simple. It's a text alert system. You opt into it, and at the end of every month, the VA will send you a text, to your phone saying, did your enrollment change, this month? And you respond yes or no. You'll get a confirmation response from the VA, and you're done. But if you didn't do this for 2 consecutive months, then the VA would withhold your monthly housing allowance until you had completed that. The purpose of this, again, is that the VA is trying to prevent students from winding up with debts to the university or to the VA, because a lot of students in the past, were signing up for classes, enrollment certifications were submitted to the VA, and then the student dropped classes or dropped below half-time or withdrew altogether, and then wound up with debts that they had to repay. So this is kind of the VA's way of prompting students to recognize if there's any change in your enrollment, you need to be notifying the VA, you need to be notifying your school certifying official. That's for your protection. That's truly what it's designed for. How much will you receive if you're using your post 9/11 GI Bill benefits? So what I put here was just sort of the percent totals based on a student's eligibility. You can see that 26,381.37 for a student who has 100% eligibility. That's the current maximum they can receive. That's for the entire year. So from August 1st of 2022 going through July 31st of 2023. If a student has less than that, 90%, you can see again what the percentage would be. Those benefits do reset every year. The VA increases the amount a little bit by a few $100s each year. They typically announce late spring what it'll be for the following year. So I don't know what it would be yet for the 23-24 aid year. Just want to stress again, to be eligible for the Yellow Ribbon program, a student has to have 100% eligibility in the post 9/11 GI Bill. That's a VA rule, it's not a Penn rule, but there is that requirement. So if a student is not eligible at 100% or doesn't meet that requirement, again, I would highly recommend applying for VRNE, just in the hopes that you can get approval and possibly get all of your tuition and fees paid for. Okay, so once a student submits their paperwork to me, what happens next? This can be a little confusing. If you've ever received financial aid at a university, you would probably know that it's typically split evenly between fall and spring or fall, spring, and summer. VA benefits don't work that way. Anytime a student wants to use their benefits, we apply as much as we can up to the total of their tuition and fees that first semester. That is because not all students want to use their benefits every single semester. So if your tuition and fees in your first term is $35,800, and you have 100% eligibility in the post 9/11 GI Bill benefit, and you have Yellow Ribbon, you're Yellow Ribbon eligible, I'm going to apply $35,800 between Chapter 33 and Yellow Ribbon to completely cover a student's tuition and fees. Again, that is for a student's benefit. In a situation where a student has exhausted their tuition portion of their VA benefits or Chapter 33, so let's say you use your benefits for fall, you exhaust your tuition benefits by the spring semester, but you're still attending classes, in summer. You have the choice, if you're not active duty, to still be submitted to the VA for that term. That is to allow you to get the monthly housing allowance. And students, I'd say it's maybe 60-40 at Penn that students do decide to go that route. For some students, they really need that money because they don't have any tuition benefits left. They're still paying tuition for their summer courses, and they need the monthly housing allowance. Having said that, the VA reduces your entitlement in any semester in which you're enrolled and using your benefits, whether you're getting your tuition paid for and the monthly housing allowance, or if you're only receiving the monthly housing allowance. So if your entitlement, your months of entitlement are limited, or if you want to potentially transfer some of those to your dependents, you may or may not benefit by using your benefits in a summer session. So that's just something to be aware of. And I know it's kind of confusing, but I explain this to students all the time. I think the best example I give to students is that for a Wharton MBA student, in let's say their fall semester, they're getting their tuition and fees entirely covered by their Chapter 33 benefit and Yellow Ribbon Award. They're getting the monthly housing allowance, and let's say they're enrolled 4.5 months for that semester. Because when we submit enrollment certifications, we're putting in a start and end date to the VA. The VA is reducing that student's entitlement just as they would a student who's taking one class, an online class at Penn, who isn't receiving the monthly housing allowance because they're either active duty or because they're enrolled less than half time, and their tuition benefit, their tuition for that one online course might cost $4,000. That student is using just the same amount of entitlement. It's by days, weeks, and months as a student at Wharton who's getting tuition, all their tuition paid for and the monthly housing allowance. So always keep in mind what your entitlement is. Get the most bang for your buck. That's what I always say to students. Use it to your advantage. So if you're ever in doubt, that's something you want to ask me about. Am I benefiting this way? What are my best options? But again, keep in mind, entitlement, I think, is the more useful way to look at your post 9/11 GI Bill benefit than just the annual maximum dollar amount. All right, so I know a big question for a lot of students is, and I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, how much are you gonna pay out of pocket? And just know tuition rates change every year. The VA tends to increase the Chapter 33 benefit a few $100s every year. In what's happened historically is that for students who start in the summer, so if you start, May of 2023, your VA aid year is the 22-23 VA year, the current aid year. If you come in with 100% eligibility, you're typically not going to pay anything out of pocket for your term 1. Term 2, you have a new round of benefits because term 2 is the fall and you're getting another round of benefits. So term 2 is entirely covered. Term 3, which would be spring 2024 for you, that is the first time you will see a shortfall where you will have started to exhaust your benefits. In that situation, it's typically around a little over $5,000 is the shortfall for spring of 2024. That's for term 3. Term 4, that's summer 2024. That is the first term in which you will have exhausted your VA benefits, again, assuming you're Chapter 33, 100% Yellow Ribbon eligible. So that is the first session that you would not receive any tuition benefits. Term 5, a new round of benefits because it's after August 1st. So that's completely covered. Term 6, again, you have a shortfall of around $5,000. So in the past, for students like in the current group that Greg's in, students in this situation, what they're typically paying out of pocket outside of their VA benefits is a total of around $46,000. And again, that's using this year's numbers. I don't have, a magic 8 ball to be able to see what the future is going to hold, what the VA is going to do. But I know that's one of the most frequently asked questions I receive from prospective students and new students. What am I going to owe? The total cost of the VA or the MBA is around $214,000. One thing I did not include is the student insurance plan. Penn requires all students to have healthcare coverage. If you are using TRICARE, if you're active duty, then you just submit a waiver, to the Student Health Services every summer, basically saying I'm covered. They waive it, you're good to go. If you do need health care coverage, then you use Penn's student insurance plan, which this year is around $4,030 for the year. That's just for a student, does not include dependents, although you can obviously pay for them. The reason I mention that is an additional expense that you may or may not have while you're attending. And the Penn student insurance plan, if you are a Chapter 31 student, you're required to get your healthcare coverage for the VA. Not required, but they won't pay for your insurance at Penn. You can use Chapter 33 benefits and Yellow Ribbon Awards to be applied towards your Penn student insurance plan because it's a mandatory expense. It's something that Penn requires, is healthcare coverage. There are a few Chapter 31 students who decided they would rather pay out of pocket to use the Penn student insurance plan than to have to get their healthcare through the VA. Most Chapter 31 students just use the VA for their healthcare. But I'm throwing that number out there just as that's a possible expense you might have. And if you do use your Chapter 33 benefits and Yellow Ribbon Awards to cover the student insurance plan, obviously you're going to be paying more out of pocket in the long run. So I know that's a ton of information.
Yes. And now you guys know why whenever we get a question about, hey, I'm a military vet, what are my benefits? We immediately send you to Lynn. Kendra and I do not even get involved in general financial aid. But the benefit is that there's so many people applying to Wharton at the grad level, and it includes full-time MBA applicants, that financial aid team can't even reach out to all candidates. But Lynn is more than happy to reach out to candidates who have the military background. We will know the tuition for the next entering class. Our hope is by the end of the year. In the past, we don't get it posted until March, but we've worked with Penn and we should have that new figure by the end of this year. The current student, Greg's class, they're paying $214,800, which does include everything except getting to campus. We know it'll go up a few percentage points. We'll have that amount soon. So, and I'll just start with Greg. If you don't mind, how did the process go for you? Does it like bring back okay memories, challenging memories, and how's it going so far?
Yeah, so I had a lot of questions coming into the process. And if you guys couldn't tell, Lynn is really passionate about this stuff. So I got on the phone with her. We talked for probably 45 minutes. And she walked me through everything you guys just heard. And then in addition, how that applied to me specifically. So I was on active duty, yellow ribbon program, wasn't going to work for my first semester because it hadn't been enacted yet. So we talked through how that was going to work, how it would change over. I'm planning on transitioning off active duty while I'm in the program. So we talked how that process would work. So I mean, really, my big plug here is give Lynn a call, talk about your specific situation, and she will take care of you. I think I can speak pretty comfortably for the rest of the vets. We've all got the warm fuzzy that our questions are answered and things are going to work out. And honestly, since I've been on campus, tuition has been pretty carefree. I haven't really thought about it. And I know some of my other peers who are not vets have been a little more concerned about how they've got to pull strings, work their own financial situation. So I feel really fortunate, one, to have the benefits, and two, to have Lynn navigating all this for me, with me.
And we did have some questions submitted through the registration form from prospective students who may be in the room today. So I can go ahead and throw a couple questions out to you, Lynn, if that's all right with you. We had a few specific questions. There was one that asked if they've already used a portion of the GI Bill, what is involved in exhausting the remainder through the program and then transitioning to another source.
So if you think that you could be eligible for Chapter 31, you don't have to exhaust your Chapter 33 benefit. My understanding is that you do have to have at least 1 day of remaining entitlement in Chapter 33 to be able to get VRNE. And in the past, it can seem misleading because in the past, the VA had sort of encouraged students use your Chapter 33, post 9/11 job benefit first, then go for Chapter 31 for VRNE. The VA started changing their tune about that about a year and a half ago. VA is much more receptive, I think, to approving VRNE at this point than they used to be in the past. And typically what it will mean is, you're admitted student, you have to submit what's called a high cost memo to your VRNE counselor. It's basically justifying why the VA should pay for, a program like Wharton. Obviously, Wharton MBA is world renowned. The Philadelphia office works really well with Penn. We typically don't run into any problems in terms of them approving, paying for the MBA. But on a separate note, if you didn't think you were eligible for VRNE and you have some remaining entitlement, one of the things I would keep in mind is that, let's say you come in and you have, 10 months of entitlement remaining, and that would cover you, say, for your first 2 terms, and you'd have a tiny bit left that would cover, term 3. Typically what the VA does is they pay the entire remaining semester, even if you run out of benefits that 3rd semester. They're pretty good about paying that remainder of the semester. So you can kind of stretch your benefits a little bit more. VA doesn't promise it, but that's what I've seen. And putting in perspective, had a student start this semester who came in with 11 days of entitlement. And I said, look, this is one of the things I do, I should mention, I put a temp credit on students' accounts in the summer as a placeholder because VA funds pay late in the semester. And that's because the VA requires schools to submit certifications, and it's called a dual certification process. Again, is to prevent students winding up with debts. What it means for you as a student is that your VA funds are always going to pay late. So in the fall, it's typically late October, early November. In the spring term, it's late March, early April. And of course, business offices, student accounts wants to have their money paid. So rather than risking students being assessed late payment penalties, I put a temp credit on that student's account. But I digress. This student had 11 days. And I said, I don't know what to put for temp credit for you because I haven't had a student come in with this small of amount of entitlement. Call the education call center, ask them what they think the VA would pay. And the education call center said they would pay the entire semester for that student. So again, this is a student coming in with 11 days, got 4.5 months of VA benefits out of it. So that is something just to keep in the back of your mind. You can try to stretch it that way. In terms of applying for another program though, again, if you think if you have a disability rating, or if you think you might even remotely be eligible, and you don't have to be 100% or have to have 100% disability rating to get VR and E. What I always say to students is it's worth a shot. Even if you have 50% disability rating, try it and see if you can get the approval. The worst the VA can say is no, sorry, we can't cover this. But again, I would not exhaust all of my Chapter 33 benefit first. I would try to get approval for Chapter 31, and then maybe save some of your post-9/11 job benefit for your dependent. If you have dependents, you can transfer it too.
I could add one thing there. So I had also previously used my Chapter 33 benefits, getting a master's elsewhere before this. And I guess I had thought I could just hand over my old certificate of eligibility. You do need to go out and get a new one with pen on it. It's not hard, it's not difficult, it's just another step.
Yeah, we typically ask for one. That's a good point. Thank you, Greg. We typically ask for one that's dated within the last calendar year. Again, that's so that you're aware of what you have, we're aware of what you have. So if a student tries to submit one that's 3 or 4 years old, which does happen sometimes, but to say, look, either get a new one or at least get me a snapshot of your benefits, so we're both aware of what you're bringing into Penn.
Great, thank you. And there was another question. If I have 100% post 9/11 and yellow ribbon, what would be the estimate student out-of-pocket cost? I'm not sure if you can answer that, but that was a question.
That is what I was mentioning earlier. It's right around, and again, it's going to be dependent on tuition rate next year and how much the VA raises. The Chapter 33 benefit, because it's going to change a little bit each year, but I would assume right around, $46,000, again, not counting if you would need student health insurance. I don't even know, Diane, can you answer, is that a requirement for the WEMBA students?
Yeah, because they're part of Penn, it is, but yeah, our students are all gainfully employed.
That's what I figured. I could,
Yeah.
But don't assume, even if you're gainfully employed, don't assume you might not be able to get VR and E, because there are WEMBA students who are using Chapter 31. Again, if you can justify how getting an MBA from Wharton is going to, help you advance in life, you can still get the approval.
Yeah, and I can refer to that. If some of you might have been on the webinar last night that Kendra's and my colleague Barbara Kraft hosted online. She had some other military students that have gone through the program to share how the degree has impacted them in their careers moving forward. And if you weren't able to log on, we'll have that recording out eventually. Yeah.
I'd take the chance to give a plug to the Wharton Veterans Club as well. Really, really strong veterans community within Wharton. So current cohort alumni, If you are thinking Chapter 31 might be where you're trying to go, and you're wondering how it's worked out for other folks, you can probably reach out and find someone to help you and talk through their story on that. Haven't done it yet. I'm still active duty, but I know some folks in my class have done it. Some have been rejected for Chapter 31 benefits. So reaching out and getting lessons learned can be useful for you while you're applying for that.
I'm just going to second what Greg's saying, because obviously I work with all veteran and military affiliated students at Penn. Wharton is actually our largest contingent of veteran students throughout the entire university. It's a fantastic group. And I've heard from other veteran students, like we wish that, my school had as many veteran students or was as close knit. They really do a great job of looking out for one another. And Wharton does a great job of taking care of its students, veteran and otherwise. So you would be in great hands. And nobody asked me to say that, by the way. My experience.
Thanks, Lynn. And we did get another question. Do you need acceptance to Wharton before you can be accepted to Chapter 31 VRNE?
I think it's easier if you've been accepted, because obviously your VRNE counselor wants to know, well, how much is the school going to cost? Where do you plan on going? Having said that, if you haven't received a disability rating, I would pursue that now, because you are doing that through the VA without actually technically applying for VRNE. But once you do get your acceptance, at that point, definitely move forward with the VRNE and applying for that, because it can take several months and it varies. It's faster now than it used to be. I think the students, the longest duration, I had one student, it was around 6-7 months. And honestly, I didn't think they were ever going to get the approval. They finally did. But in that case, I'm pretty sure the student was not staying on top of what their VRNE counselor needed. Most students, it seems to be a couple of months now. So get your acceptance, apply for VRNE. And that way, by the time you start, you'd hopefully have the approval or be really close to receiving that approval.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Feel free to post it, or if you want to just unmute, feel free.
I have a quick question. Is there any, I know there's 2 application deadlines, and I see Shauna's on this call. I actually talked to her earlier on in the week, and I know the first application deadline is actually coming up within the next week. And unfortunately, I only want to be able to get everything together in order to apply for the first round. So I'm going to be waiting until the second round if all goes as planned. Is there any disadvantage of waiting to the second round versus the first with acceptance, I guess, in general to the program, and then specifically as it relates to VA benefits? Thank you.
As far as being accepted to WEMBA, there is not. No, there's each round is unique every year. There's really no pattern. We're always taking the most qualified people in every round. And the reality is, if you're not ready to submit by October 12th, it's a rushed app. The outcome is probably not going to be good versus 2 more months to really pull things together nicely and feel good about what you submit in January. That's definitely a better outcome. Lynn, does the timing matter for you? Like if they're admitted for round 1, they learn in December, and then round 2, the decision will go out in March. I mean, I know, I mean, that's normally our round 2 people. It's usually March when they find out, and that's never been an issue, I don't think.
It would not, for Wharton, it would not have any impact. Reason being is that there's unlimited number of yellow ribbon slots. There are some schools within Penn and other institutions that have a limited number. And in those cases, federal law requires schools to basically offer yellow ribbon on a first come, first served basis. That's based on the date that an admitted student submits their COE to the school. So I do have, schools within Penn where they have 5 total slots. And when that student's admitted and I receive their COE, I am dating it because I know I may potentially not be able to offer a slot to anybody, but that is not the case with Wharton. So what I wouldn't recommend doing is you get your acceptance and wait, 4 months to submit the paperwork to me or contact me. Don't recommend that.
I have a follow-up question related to that. The certificate of eligibility, I just jotted some notes down. And I think you can do all that on the VA website. Now, is that for both? Will that give you both Chapter 30 see what benefits are available for chapter 33 and chapter 31, or is there like something separate you got to do for chapter 31?
Yep, so that's only for chapter 33. And when you go onto the VA's website, it's just va.gov/education, or you just type in VA education benefits, because it'll, they'll walk you through step by step. What do you think you're eligible for? Some students don't even know, honestly, have no idea what their eligibility is for any of the benefits. Chapter 31 is different. Your first thing is it's easier if you get your disability rating through the VA first. Having said that, you can still apply for VRNE while you're trying to get your disability rating. Just takes a bit longer. So I would recommend getting the disability rating now. Once you have that, you'll apply through the VA's website for VRNE. And what they'll do is, they'll see your information and you'll be contacted for sort of an initial consultation with a VRNE counselor. It's been, for the last 2 years, it's been, virtual consultations. I don't know what point that'll change and they'll go back to face-to-face, but my understanding is that it's still virtual. But at any point, your VRNE counselor, they're just going to talk to you about whether they think you're eligible for or not, explain the process, and then you'll start going through that approval process. At the end of that, assuming you receive your approval, they're going to give you a letter, and it's going to say, we've determined that you're entitled, for veteran readiness employment, and you'll get that copy of that letter to me. But just like with VRNE, there's no limited number of slots because it's not VRNE chapter 31. It's not compatible with Yellow Ribbon. Yellow Ribbon is associated with the post 9/11 GI Bill benefit, not with other benefits. Having said that, VRNE, you don't need Yellow Ribbon because VRNE pays for all of the students' tuition and fees. So it covers 100%. One exception I should mention is if student is doing dual degree, VA will only pay for 1 degree.
Which is not an option at WEMBA.
Not an option at WEMBA, but there are students in the traditional Wharton program that are dual degree, and then they have to pick one program for VA to cover.
Hi there, Lynn, can you hear me okay?
I can. Hi, Patrick.
Hi there. Hey, I'm considering, I live here in Southern California, so I'm considering coming up, obviously upon approval, to the San Fran WEMBA program. And I'm just, not only is it a time commitment, but the cost of flying up there and hotel stays. I'm trying to just get a roundabout number for if I was chapter 33 or chapter 31, the monthly BAH in a place like San Francisco. I imagine that's pretty significant.
I don't know off the top of my head if it's San Francisco. The last time I checked, and it's been a while, I want to say it was definitely over $4,000. And what you can do just to confirm that, it might even be 5 by now. Look at on Wharton's website, the zip code, plug that in for the BAH calculator, E5 with dependents. That's going to tell you exactly what you'll receive for the MHA for San Francisco.
Okay, and I'm not approved. Honestly, this chapter 31 VRNE feels new to a lot of us veterans. Also, it's interesting hearing from you that more people are getting approved. I feel like I heard a couple years ago, you had a very long shot at getting approved for this program. So that's great news. But to assume that you were approved for chapter 31, would you also be getting that BAH as part of the chapter 33? Can you answer that?
So that's it's the subsistence allowance is what it's called for chapter 31, and it's significantly less than what it is for the MHA for chapter 33. But again, I think this is where your VRNE counselor would determine if it's appropriate for you to receive, if you're approved for 31, it's appropriate for you to receive the MHA rate at the chapter 33 rate. Now, VA doesn't, because that's again payment directly from the VA to students. So the VA kind of leaves the schools out of it and doesn't tell us exactly how they determine why students should be able to receive, that rate. And that's where sometimes when students start out in chapter 33 for their first semester, while they're applying for VRNE, get the approval, they seem to have better success with getting the housing allowance rate at the chapter 33 rate. So that's something you might want to keep in mind, especially if you're chapter 33 100%. To me, if you're burning 4.5 months of entitlement and it means you can get that higher housing allowance at the San Francisco rate, it might be something worth considering, doing it as you start. Because the other thing that VRE counselors will do is they'll say, okay, is there anything, let's say you attended school for a year at Penn using Chapter 33. When you get approved for Chapter 31, your counselor will look to see, is there anything that Chapter 33 didn't cover, tuition and fees, that the VA can pay retroactively using Chapter 31 benefits. Because we had that happen not infrequently. Had a student who just graduated, got approved for VRE after he graduated, and now it's called a retroactive induction. The VA and the student and I are working to see what the student is eligible to receive for the last 2 years of their graduate program at Penn, that Chapter 33 didn't cover using VRE benefits. So I know that's not a direct answer, but it's really going to be dependent on your counselor. And I definitely think you should try pursuing the approval. Get your disability rating first. Don't assume you have to be 100% disabled, because you don't. Just try to get the disability rating, go through the approval process. The other thing too is you could always say, you know what, I don't want to use VRE. I'm going to use Chapter 33 because the monthly housing allowance is so much better. Then again, if you're paying $46,000 out of pocket over the long haul, it would be hard for me to see why a student wouldn't want to go with VRE.
And I just want to confirm too that yes, for individuals who have to fly to either San Francisco or Philadelphia and arrive the night before in order to start class on Friday morning, that night before hotel stay or whatever they stay would be extra. The tuition does cover any in-between nights. That's part of the cost of the program. But yeah, a lot of folks do need to spend a little extra out of pocket, not just to fly up, but then to pay for a hotel the night before.
I am definitely in that boat. Coming from Huntsville, Alabama, so I fly in the night prior, stay at the hotel the night prior. Yeah, it works out.
So did I hear that correctly? One night is covered as part of the program tuition in a hotel?
Yep, absolutely. Most classes are a Friday morning to Saturday afternoon. The Friday night stay is included in that tuition cost, the room and board for any in-between nights. If it's extended session, the in-between nights are not the night before the start of the program. And it's usually 9:30 in the morning. There are flights I know from Southern California that you might be able to get to San Francisco by the start of the class, but it's usually kind of a rushed feeling. Most people do choose to come in the night before. And there's a nice group that gets together both in Philly and San Francisco the night before, all the flyer-ins, right? And they just have to cross the street the next morning to go to class, but it does require that extra cost commitment.
And I haven't done it yet, but I think the marketing week and global week are also included for with tuition.
Yes, they are. Anytime you have a required class, you have to be there. We cover the ground cost, the room and board.
Hi, Lynn. I got a question about the Chapter 33 benefits. I'm in the same boat, I think, as Greg, and I used some benefits to do another master's degree. So with probably be coming in with about 17 and a half months of benefits remaining, you think that'd be enough to get me into term 6 and kind of ride out the VA's good graces and cover the whole program?
So you're active duty now?
I am.
Will you remain active duty for your entire time in your MBA, or are you going to separate at some point?
I'll remain active duty.
Okay, so here's the benefit for you. Your second summer session, so that would be what, summer 24, because you'll have exhausted your tuition benefit and you're receiving BH, so you can't get MHA. It makes no sense for you to use your benefit for that semester because you wouldn't get anything out of it. So you're really talking about 5 terms you'd be using the benefit for. Your terms 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. So I think you can get the bulk of it covered. I don't know about all of it, but I think you can get the bulk of it covered. And it really, when I submit your enrollment certification, it's the start date of classes, end date of classes about the semester. That's how the VA reduces your entitlement. I've never calculated exactly what it would be because it would obviously be dependent on school by school, program by program. But it's helpful to you if you know exactly what your entitlement is, kind of figuring out, all right, if it's 4 months for each term, 4, 8, 12. Yeah, I mean, I think you might not have enough to cover your last term, but I think the bulk of it, you would be fine. And then again, if you were eligible, if you did separate and were eligible for Chapter 31, obviously you can't do that when you're active duty. But if you did separate while you were enrolled, I would pursue Chapter 31.
Yeah, and it's the ROI, as we call it, investing in yourself. It's of course an individual thing, but the vast majority of our students are actually paying the vast majority of the 200,000 plus themselves, and just investing in themselves in the future. But I really do encourage everyone to have those one-off conversations with Lynn. As you can see, each person comes in with a different background and status and so forth, and I know that she'll be happy to make sure you understand your situation, and it's a moving target. And it's just about communicating throughout the journey.
Would yellow ribbon be offered for, let's say you have 2 months out of that one term of 4, would it cover the 20,000, or would it be half that amount since it's only covering 2 months out of the 4?
Meaning if you were only had 2 months of entitlement for that term?
Yeah.
Okay. I couldn't guarantee the VA would pay the full yellow ribbon amount. That's something they don't notify schools of that. I would hope they would. They would definitely pay the entire Chapter 33 benefit. It's possible they would prorate yellow ribbon. That might be a question you could ask an education call center, and you get to that point to say, look, this is what I've got. How much will you pay in yellow ribbon? Obviously, Wharton, would be happy to contribute their portion of it. Depending on what the VA would pay, that I can't guarantee. If you're 3/4 of the way through, I would feel pretty confident they would pay all the yellow ribbon. Halfway, maybe not.
Anybody else have a question as we're nearing the end here? Okay. So, Lynn, do you mind? I'll post your email address here. Would you mind? I'll put it in the chat.
That's fine.
Let me confirm what it is here. What can you share that with me?
Sure. Well, there's 2. So it's veterans, that's plural, at upenn.edu.
Mhm.
And then also L like Lynn, Manuel at upenn.edu.
MANUEL.
That's correct.
Yeah.
At upenn.edu.
All right. And the best is, if you need her advice, ping her, and, to arrange a call if necessary, if she doesn't have a response on email. Well, great. I want to really thank Lynn for all her insights into this process, and for Kendra for monitoring the chat, and for Greg for sharing his experience. And I want to thank all of you for your service and for being here today. Please stay in touch with the admissions team as well. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Nice to
Thank
meet you.
you.
Take care.
Bye.